Forgiveness is not for others, but for ourselves, to release us from the shackles of strife and to give ourselves eternal peace. Those words echoed like a sacred hymn in the back of his mind, even 15 years after the reckoning that broke him. 15 long years since he stood over the bodies of 2 starving men outside Secumber, men who took his wife from him. They had begged for their lives, pleaded with mouths cracked from thirst and eyes hollow from hunger. But he had offered no mercy, and for it, he lost everything: his God, his light, his oath. In the aftermath, he found only silence where Lathander once spoke, and only cold steel to guide him. Yet from the wreckage of judgment came a single ember. A child, the boy they had cared for, the only remnant of the life those men had tried to build. And so, the broken Paladin took the boy as his ward. The boy grew, and the Paladin taught him not vengeance, but discipline, not hatred, but strength. He would walk a different path than the one carved by grief. He would know justice, not wrath. To teach another the path you once strayed from is to walk its edge a second time. For 15 years, he had wandered the Sword Coast, an exile in shining armor, not by decree, but by choice. The voices of the past were never far from his mind. The scream of his wife, the silence that followed her death, and the cold echo that came when Lathander turned away. But the boy changed everything. Giltrick of Secumber, orphaned by his hand, became the one light he still guarded. A child raised not in temples, but along old roads, dusty ruins, and blood-stained battlegrounds. He did not train the boy to be a warrior of vengeance. He taught him to be what he could never finish becoming: a knight of the dawn, a beacon to others, rather than a sword in the dark. The boy's training began with the body. Every motion, every stance had to be measured, controlled. He was not taught to swing with fury, but with intent. In the shadow of moonlit ruins, they sparred. Blades clashed beneath starlight as the older Paladin barked corrections, adjusting posture, reminding the boy to listen to the wind, to his opponent's breath, to the voice of instinct that whispered just before the strike. He made the boy study the anatomy of monsters, how to cripple a goblin's hamstring, how to read the moment a green dragon coils before it exhales poison, how to track a hag by scent and silence. You don't fight to kill, he would say. You fight to protect. And to protect, you must know your enemy better than it knows itself. But behind the instruction, guilt laced every lesson. The Paladin knew that by giving the boy this knowledge, he was shaping a weapon. He could only pray that he was also shaping the wisdom to sheathe it. With every wound came a lesson in healing, not just the flesh, but the soul. The Paladin taught Giltrick the subtle prayers to mend bones, the rhythms of magic that could knit sinew, soothe pain, and restore clarity. But the magic came more easily to Giltrick than it ever had to him. The boy's connection to Lathander was not strained, not cracked by betrayal or doubt. His light was unclouded. It was this that humbled the Paladin most of all. He showed Giltrick how to draw on pain, not to be ruled by it, but to transform it. There is a sacred art to healing, he told him one night by the fire, both of them battered from a recent skirmish. Our pain can become strength. But if we let it linger too long, it festers into poison. Learn from mine. Do not let sorrow rot your purpose. Giltrick would listen in silence. And sometimes, when he thought the Paladin wasn't looking, the boy would weep. Not for himself, but for the man who had once walked in light, and now wore shadow as a second skin. The third and final step was one the Paladin could no longer teach: divine favor, the radiant smite, the wrathful light of Lathander, channeled through conviction and purpose. Here, the Paladin was no mentor. only a witness. He watched Giltric's blade ignite with sunlight, saw his shield glow with warmth that repelled darkness. He felt the dawn's breath stir the air when the boy prayed. It was the same light he had once carried. And yet, it did not hurt to see it in the boy's hands. It brought something else, an ache of bittersweet pride. He was not jealous, only grateful that the fire had not died with him. Still, he drew strength not from the Morning Lord, but from the unseen night. A cold, silent patron, formless, nameless, but ever present. A being who asked no forgiveness and offered no absolution, only power in return for resolve. The Paladin had made peace with it, though peace was perhaps too generous a word. He had found function in the absence of grace. Now, he watched the boy become what he could not. And perhaps, he thought, that was enough. Some burdens cannot be cast aside. They must be carried, and with each step, weigh heavier. The notice was nailed unevenly to the board outside Seacumber's old watchpost, its ink half faded by rain and wind. 250 gold to any who can slay the wormling that haunts the western fen. A child, the townsfolk called it. A young black dragon, wounded, cornered, but not defeated. It had taken the lives of 6 guards before vanishing into the mire. The boy, Giltric, had read the parchment aloud, with the spark of justice in his voice. His mentor, the old Paladin, said nothing for a long time. He remembered the path west. He remembered the trees, the mud, the small cottage where the 2 men had lived. Their voices cracked with fear, their hands trembling as they begged. Not for gold, not for vengeance, for understanding. They had taken his wife's life in a moment of desperate confusion, their minds clouded by hunger, by grief, by the belief that she was a wealthy traveler who would never be missed. He had shown them no mercy. The memory struck like a silent blow to the gut. The same dirt trail underfoot, the same cold wind, the same heavy silence in his chest. Would the slaying of this young worm, another orphaned, cornered soul, make anything right? Still, they pressed on. The swamps northwest of Seacumber had changed. Once just marshland, now they reeked of ruin. The air clung to the skin like wet oil. Trees leaned like mourners over a drowned corpse. Vines coiled like veins through black soil, pulsing faintly with residual magic. The corruption was spreading, marked by rot and silence. This was not merely the work of a beast, it was a wound on the land. They waded carefully, the boys scanning with practiced eyes for false terrain and hidden runes. The Paladin's senses were honed by decades of grim experience. He had slain older dragons than this, but age meant little when acid burned through armor and bone alike. Every so often, they found what remained of the guards. Helms half melted, swords snapped like twigs, flesh long dissolved. The boy faltered at the sight. He had never seen death so cruel, so defiled. The Paladin placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Steel your heart, but do not harden it. This is what we fight against, not just the creature, but the horror it brings. Giltric nodded, though his knuckles were white on the hilt of his sword. As they moved deeper into the mire, whispers began to follow them, subtle at first, like trickling water, then clearer, mocking tones, echoes of sorrow twisted into venomous speech, illusions conjured from memory. The Paladin heard the voice of his wife once more, but twisted, accusing, bitter, dead. It was the dragon's magic, psychological warfare, designed to shake the mind. But his mind was already broken. They steeled themselves, invoked wards, whispered prayers. Giltric's aura burned faintly gold, pushing back the worst of the illusions. The Paladin had no such warmth, but his resolve was stone. The fight began in an instant. A black shape tore from the water, wings unfurling like shadows, its shriek sharp enough to split bone. Acid poured from its maw, searing into the Paladin's shield. Eating through metal, like fire through parchment. The dragon was young, but cunning. It struck from blind angles, vanished into fog, baited them with illusory clones. The boy fought fiercely, his blade burning with divine wrath. He healed when his mentor stumbled, drove the dragon back when it lunged. Together they danced the dance of death. But then it struck true. A lucky arc of acid bypassed the shield, spraying across the paladin's side. Flesh hissed. He screamed, buckled, fell. Giltrick howled in reply, light erupting from his form in a final blow that drove the beast to the mud, its dying screams swallowed by the swamp. The paladin lay in silence, his body failing, his breath ragged. But his mind was adrift in memory. He saw again the two men on their knees. He saw again his sword, still wet with their blood. He saw the baby in the corner, crying, confused, alone. And now that baby knelt beside him, a boy grown into a man raised in the shadow of guilt. Forgiveness is not a blade, it is not swift, it is not clean, it is a wound that chooses to remain open so that light may enter. The dragon's corpse steamed as it died, black blood spilling into the muck like ink poured into a still pond. Steam rose from the acid-drenched soil. The swamp held its breath. Giltrick dropped to his knees beside the old paladin. His mentor's armor hissed where the acid had burned through, revealing raw, ruined flesh. His face was pale, lips parted in shallow, ragged gasps. The boy's hands trembled as they hovered over the wound. Healing magic flickered in his fingers but would not come. His voice cracked when he tried to call on Lathander. The words caught in his throat. "No," the old paladin whispered. "Do not mourn yet." Giltrick stared down at him, confusion and anguish battling in his face. "You're dying. I can't stop it." The paladin's eyes, dim with pain, still held clarity. There is more than flesh at stake. And then the light came. Not the warm glow of the boy's healing magic, nor the cold illumination of the dying day. This light came from within, a radiant silence that fell upon them both, a moment outside of time. The air shimmered. The trees bent away, as if in reverence, and in the place where death had nearly triumphed, divinity took root. They stood now, not in the swamp, but in a place beyond places. A glade lit by dawnlight, where flowers bloomed from memory and birdsong echoed with the laughter of things lost. Lathander stood before them. He did not need to speak. The warmth of his presence washed away all doubt, yet did not absolve the past. This was not mercy unearned. This was choice offered freely. "You once again come to me," the Morning Lord said, not with a voice, but with understanding. "It has been 15 long years." The paladin stood, younger somehow, no longer wounded, but burdened still. "My actions, they cost me everything." "You made a choice," Lathander replied. "You punished two men for what they did, but not for why they did it. You refused to see the pain behind the crime, and so you lost me, but you did not stop walking." The paladin turned to Giltrick, who stood silently. The boy's face was pale, his eyes locked on the Morning Lord. "This is where you left him." "This is where he chose to be left," said Lathander gently. "But you, my child, stand at the same crossroads." Lathander opened a hand. In it shimmered a memory, not a vision, but a truth. The two men again, kneeling, crying, pleading, the blood on the paladin's sword, the infant Giltrick wailing in the corner. "This man took your caretakers from you. He raised you in the shadow of that loss. What will you do with it?" Giltrick stepped forward, his eyes locked on the older man, who stood now like a statue carved from regret. "You were the reason I survived," he said, "and the reason I was orphaned. You were both my shield and my scar. The words hung heavy. The boy reached out a hand. "When you forgive, you in no way change the past," Giltrick said. "But you sure do change the future." He placed his hand on the Paladin's shoulder, and the light surged. Not the punishing light of judgment, not the cold severance of wrath. This was renewal. Lathander's light bloomed in both of them, one who had lost his faith, and one who had just begun to shape his own. The glade faded, the warmth faded, the world returned. The swamp was still there, the dragon still dead, the paladin still injured. But something fundamental had changed. The guilt had not been erased, but it no longer ruled. They stood not as master and student, but as brothers, bound not by blood or vengeance, but by the choice to forgive, and to carry that forgiveness forward into a world still haunted by darkness. The paladin still bore his scars. His oath remained shattered, but in teaching the boy, in guiding him towards the light, he had found a kind of redemption. And though Lathander did not restore what was lost, he did what gods seldom do. He let them choose. Together, they chose forgiveness. And with that choice, the light of the Morning Lord rose once more.